At this point in the story, my wife wants it known that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her: this is me, and I'm not trying to be confusing, but the above paragraph that I'm cutting into now is verbatim Morgenstern. He was continually referring to his wife in the unabridged book, saying that she loved the next section, or she thought that, all in all, the book was extraordinarily brilliant. Mrs. Morgenstern was rarely anything but supportive to her husband, unlike some wives I could mention. Sorry about that, Helen. But here's the thing. I got rid of almost all the intrusions when he told us what she thought. I didn't think the device added a whole lot. And besides, he was always complimenting himself through her, and today we know that hyping something too much does more harm than good, as any defeated political candidate will tell you when he pays his television bills. The thing of it is, I left this particular reference in because, for once, I totally happen to agree with Mrs. Morgenstern. I think it was unfair not to show the reunion, so I wrote one of my own, what I felt Buttercup and Wesley might have said. But Hiram, my editor, felt that made me just as unfair as Morgenstern here. If you're going to abridge a book in the author's own words, you can't go around sticking your own in. That was Hiram's point, and we really went round and round, arguing over, I guess, a period of a month, in person, through letters, on the phone. Finally, we compromised to this extent. This, what you're reading in the regular type, is strict Morgenstern. Verbatim. Cut, yes. Changed, no. But I got Hiram to agree that Harcourt would at least print up my scene. Ballantine has agreed to do the same. It's all of 3 pages. Big deal. And if any of you want to see what it came out like, drop a note or postcard to Urban Del Rey at Ballantine Books, 1540 Broadway, New York City, and just mention you'd like the reunion scene. Don't forget to include your return address. You'd be stunned at how many people send in for things and don't put their return address down. The publishers agreed to spring for the postage costs, so your total expense is the note or card or whatever. It would really upset me if I turned out to be the only modern American writer who gave the impression that he was with a generous publishing house. They all stink. Sorry about that, Mr. Jovanovich. So let me just add here that the reason they are so generous in paying this giant postage bill is because they fully expect nobody to write in. So please, if you have the least interest at all, or even if you don't, write in for my reunion scene. You don't have to read it, I'm not asking that, but I would love to cost those publishing geniuses a few dollars, because, let's face it, they're not spending much on advertising my books. Let me just repeat the address for you, zip code and all. Urban Del Rey, Ballantine Books, 1745 Broadway, New York, New York, 10019, or email us at delray@randomhouse.com, and just ask for your copy of the reunion scene. This has gone on longer than I planned, so I'm going to repeat the Morgenstern paragraph I interrupted. It'll read better. Over and out. Yeah, I noticed that too, Undark. It's 1540 Broadway, and then it's 1745 Broadway. I'm really curious if either of those are real. And I'm really curious if anybody has ever written in. And also, if they're not real, is there some random apartment that someone is like just continually getting these requests? Kind of like the song 8675309. Mine is for, oh really? Wait, maybe it's you have a different publisher, because mine is Ballantine Del Rey. I'm curious enough to look this up. That is interesting that they would change that. Well, I would imagine that even if it's like a fictional address, the different publishing companies probably wouldn't want to like give their like competitors any kind of like publicity. Maybe? I don't really know. Okay, 1745 Broadway is, it just says 19. What does that mean? There's nothing that indicates like, oh wait, there is a publisher there. It's not either of the ones that's in the book. It's Tongus Publications. Wait a second. Your address checks out. Well, since I had two addresses, let me look up the other one. I kind of want this to be like a, what are those mystery hunt things called? A scavenger hunt? 1540. Let me try 1540. It says nothing about a publishing house or anything like that. I don't know, that's just so weird. I kind of want it to be a scavenger hunt, but also this book was probably printed, I think this book was printed in 1998. So like, stuff is not going to stay the same, especially in New York. At this point in the story, my wife wants it known that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her is simply this. A. Each of God's beings, from the lowliest on up, is entitled to at least a few moments of genuine privacy. B. What actually was spoken, while moving enough to those involved at the actual time, flattens like toothpaste when transferred to paper for later reading. My dove, my only, bliss, bliss, etc. C. Nothing of importance in an expository way was related, because every time Buttercup began, "Tell me about yourself," Wesley quickly cut her off with, "Later, beloved, now is not the time." However, it should be noted, in fairness to all, that 1. He did weep. 2. Her eyes did not remain precisely dry. 3. There was more than one embrace. And 4. Both parties admitted that without any qualifications whatsoever, they were more than a little glad to see each other. Besides, 5. Within a quarter of an hour, they were arguing. It began quite innocently, the two of them kneeling, facing each other, Wesley holding her perfect face in his quick hands. "When I left you," he whispered, "you were already more beautiful than anything I dared to dream. In our years apart, my imaginings did their best to improve on your perfection. At night, your face was forever behind my eyes. And now I see that vision who kept me company in my loneliness was a hag compared to the beauty now before me." "Enough about my beauty," Buttercup said. "Everybody always talks about how beautiful I am. I've got a mind, Wesley. Talk about that." "Throughout eternity I shall do that very thing," he told her. "But now we haven't time." He made it to his feet. The ravine fall had shaken and battered him, but all his bones survived the trip uncracked. He helped her to her feet. "Wesley," Buttercup said then, "just before I started down after you, while I was still up there, I could hear you saying something, but the words were indistinct. I've forgotten whatever it was." "Terrible liar." He smiled at her and kissed her cheek. "It's not important, believe me. The past has a way of being past." "We must not begin with secrets from each other," she meant it. Let's put a let's put a pause in there. "We must not begin with secrets from each other." She meant it. He could tell that. "Trust me," he tried. "I do. So tell me your words, or I shall be given reason not to." Wesley sighed. "What I was trying to get through to you, beloved sweet, what I was, as a matter of accurate fact, shouting with everything I had left, was, whatever you do, stay up there, don't come down here, please." This scene feels out of place. It's kind of like he's saying that he's not going to add the scene, and then he goes ahead and adds it anyway. So it sort of feels like he's just kind of changing his mind about what he's doing. "Whatever you do, stay up there. Don't come down here, please." "You didn't want to see me." "Of course I wanted to see you. I just didn't want to see you down here." "Why ever not?" "Because now, my precious, we're more or less kind of trapped. I can't climb out of here and bring you with me without it taking all day. I can get out myself, most likely, without it taking all day, but with the addition of your lovely bulk, it's not about to happen." "Nonsense. You climbed the cliffs of insanity, and this isn't nearly that steep." And it took a little out of me, too, let me tell you. And after all that little effort, I tangled with a fella who knew a little something about fencing, and after that I spent a few happy moments grappling with a giant, and after that I had to outfake a Sicilian to death when any mistake meant it was a knife in the throat for you. And after that I've run my lungs out a couple of hours, and after that I was pushed 200 feet down a rock ravine. I'm tired, Buttercup. Do you understand tired? I've put in a night, is what I'm trying to get through to you. I'm not stupid, you know. Quit bragging. Stop being rude. When was the last time you read a book? The truth now, and picture books don't count. I mean something with print in it. Buttercup walked away from him. There's other things to read than print, she said, and the Princess of Hammersmith is displeased with you and is thinking seriously of going home. With no more words, she whirled into his arms, then saying, Oh, Wesley, I didn't mean that. I didn't, not a single syllable of it. Now Wesley knew that she meant to say not a single syllable of it, because a syllabub is something you ate with cream and wine mixed in together to form the base. But he also knew an apology when he heard one, so he held her very close and shut his loving eyes and only whispered, I knew it was false, believe me, every single syllabub. And that out of the way, they started running as fast as they could along the flat rock floor of the ravine. So this feels like Morgenstern was really just kind of saying no to his wife, but then allowing her to have her way anyway. That's sort of how it feels to me. So it's kind of out of place because he says no initially, but ultimately that's just sort of how it reads. She wanted a love scene. Well, yeah. But in a book of history that Morgenstern is trying to write, I don't think that necessarily fits. Well, she wanted a reconciliation, which I guess could be a love scene. But yeah, it feels like he says no, and then he's like, well, okay, but how about this? Like, I can't do that exactly, but I'll at least give you, like, them having a moment with each other. Even if that moment ends up being, like, an argument. Wesley, naturally enough, was considerably ahead of Buttercup with the realization that they were heading into the fire swamp. Whether it was a touch of sulfur riding a breeze or a flick of yellow flame far ahead in the daylight, he could not say for sure. But once he realized what was about to happen, he began as casually as possible to find a way to avoid it. A quick glance up the sheer ravine sides ruled out any possibility of his getting Buttercup past the climb. He dropped to the ground, as he had been doing every few minutes, to test the speed of their trackers. Now he guessed them to be less than half an hour behind and gaining. He rose and ran with her, faster, neither of them spending breath in conversation. It was only a matter of time before she understood what they were about to be into. So he decided to beat back her panic in any way possible. I think we can slow down a bit now, he told her, slowing down a bit. They're still well behind. They are separated lovers that truly love each other. Yeah. I agree with her. I would love to see that too. I don't know if it would fit. And especially if we're talking about in the movie, the little kid who's getting the story is going to be like, no, ew, you can skip that part. Buttercup took a deep breath of relief. Wesley made a show of checking their surroundings. Then he gave her his best smile. With any luck at all, he said, we should soon be safely in the fire swamp. Buttercup heard his speech, of course, but she did not take it well. A few words now on two related subjects. One, fire swamps in general, and two, the Florin-Gilder fire swamp in particular. 1. Fire swamps are, of course, entirely misnamed. As to why this has happened, no one knows, though probably the colorful quality of the two words together is enough. Simply, there are swamps which contain a large percentage of sulfur and other gas bubbles that burst continually into flame. They are covered with lush giant trees that shadow the ground, making the flame bursts seem particularly dramatic. Because they are dark, they are almost always quite moist, thereby attracting the standard insect and alligator community that prefers a moist climate. In other words, a fire swamp is just a swamp, period. The rest is embroidery. 2. The Florin-Gilder fire swamp did and does have some particular odd characteristics. A. The existence of snow sand, and B. The presence of the ROUS, about which a bit more later. Snow sand is usually, again, incorrectly identified with lightning sand. Nothing could be less accurate. Lightning sand is moist and basically destroys by drowning. Snow sand is as powdery as anything short of talcum, and destroys by suffocation. Most particularly, though, the Florin-Gilder fire swamp was used to frighten children. There was not a child in either country that at one time or another was not, when misbehaving very badly, threatened with abandonment in the fire swamp. More parents being awful. Do that one more time, you're going to the fire swamp, is as common as clean your plate, people are starving in China. And so, as children grew, so did the danger of the fire swamp in their enlarging imaginations. No one, of course, ever actually went into the fire swamp. Something flickered, but nothing has changed. Still streaming. Yes. Okay. I don't know. Something flickered. Let me go back. And so, as children grew, so did the danger of the fire swamp in their enlarging imaginations. No one, of course, ever actually went into the fire swamp, although every year or so a diseased ROUS might wander out to die, and its discovery would only add to the myth and the horror. The largest known fire swamp is, of course, within a day's drive of Perth. It is impenetrable and over 25 miles square. The one between Florin and Gilder was barely a third that size. No one had been able to discover if it was impenetrable or not. Buttercup stared at the fire swamp. As a child, she had once spent an entire nightmared year convinced that she was going to die there. Now she could not move another step. The giant trees blackened the ground ahead of her. From every part came the sudden flames. "You cannot ask it of me," she said. "I must. I once dreamed I would die here." "So did I. So did we all. Were you 8 that year? I was." 8? 6? I can't remember. Wesley took her hand. She could not move. "Must we?" Wesley nodded. "Why?" "Now is not the time." He pulled her gently. She still could not move. Wesley took her in his arms. "Child, sweet child, I have a knife. I have my sword. I did not come across the world to lose you now." Buttercup was searching somewhere for a sufficiency of courage. Evidently, she found it in his eyes. At any rate, hands in hand, they moved into the shadows of the fire swamp. Prince Humperdinck just stared. He sat astride a white, studying the footsteps down on the floor of the ravine. There was simply no other conclusion. The kidnapper had dragged his princess into it. Count Rugen sat alongside. "Did they actually go in?" The prince nodded. Praying the answer would be no, the count asked, "Do you think we should follow them?" The prince shook his head. "They'll either live or die in there. If they die, I have no wish to join them. If they live, I'll greet them on the other side." "It's too far around," the count said. "Not for my whites." "We'll follow as best we can," the count said. He stared again at the fire swamp. He must be very desperate, or very frightened, or very stupid, or very brave. "Very all four, I should think," the prince replied. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.